Welcome to this week's meeting of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. The theme of our club is innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. And we use technology as part of our club in order to further our goals. We have a special meeting today with a special guest, and the guest is Jessie Suren, who is going to talk on student loans and her history with student loans and advice to the club members in regarding how to avoid student loans and how to get them paid off, hopefully. And with that, I turn the meeting over to Jessie.
Thank you. So, all right. So I'm going to share my presentation, and bear with me because I'm not that tech savvy. So, understanding the student debt crisis is the theme of my presentation, and I actually share my bio a little bit. So I graduated LaSalle University in 2010, and I received my bachelor's degree, and I studied criminal justice and communication. After graduating there, I actually ended up getting a job for a loan collector agency for student loans, American Education Services. It was just something that I did for a little while I was searching for a job, and it actually really helped because I did get extensive education about student loans there in the asset maintenance department. Since then, I've learned everything from deferments and forgiveness. I had my own $90,000 of student loan debt. So I've learned a lot just from having my own experiences, and I've now actually completely paid those off. And I'm passionate about helping and educating other students and folks with student debt and being able to help with this crisis that we have in America. So like I mentioned, graduated in 2010 from LaSalle University. It actually cost a total of $161,000 to go there for 4 years. That's living on campus and attending there for 4 years. That was the sticker price. So very, very expensive. I did not actually end up paying $161,000. I borrowed about $76,000 to attend there. I had a lot of scholarships and financial aid and grants, but I did still need to take almost half in student loans to cover the payments. I didn't take that all out at once. That was just over the period of 4 years, semester by semester. So with my story, I was featured in Consumer Reports in a documentary that they had done about me, kind of a microscopic view of the student debt problem in America. It got a lot of attention, and it started to gain interest across the world, really. I even had international articles done highlighting my student debt as just a microscope to the problem, because my story is not unique in any way. I'm one of 44 million people that have student loans. So I was just willing to share my story because I was interested in changing it. Since then, I have paid off my debt. So they are completely zeroed out now, which I was very proud of. I started a YouTube channel talking about it called The Rich Cool Aunt. I documented my journey in paying off the student loans and also just answering questions about forgiveness on student loans. I utilized a program to get 45,000 of them forgiven. So I just been trying to help people as much as possible to get out of the situation. And then I actually just recently did my debt-free scream on the Dave Ramsey show because I subscribed to his methods in order to help me pay off that debt. So that's kind of a little bit of background about me. My story, this is the original video that caught the attention of Consumer Reports. So this video is actually really what started it all for me. I originally did this video as a part of a contest. It was just to win a 1-month student loan payment. I did not win the contest, but it definitely has helped me since then, just from from everything it's kind of caused a ripple effect. So let me try and share this video.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessie and I went to LaSalle University for 4 years. I studied criminal justice
Let me
there.
try to make this louder.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessie and I went to LaSalle University for 4 years.
You hear
I
that,
studied criminal
Roger?
justice there and I graduated in 2010. I'm still currently looking for a career in my field, and in the meantime I've been living a hectic lifestyle, working multiple jobs in order to pay the minimum back on my student loans. Because of the student loans being so much, I have been unable to afford my mom's house, and it wasn't unreasonable for me to afford a student debt payment to be housed by now. Sadly, this isn't the reality of just myself, but most of my friends, as well as thousands of other graduates across the country now that never expected to have this kind of insurmountable debt over their head once they graduated. Albert Einstein once said that logic will get you from point A to point B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So with that in mind, instead of telling you about my out of student debt story, I thought it'd be a better idea to show you. So here is a day in the life of a student loan.
Okay, so
Hey, I created this beautiful logo for my bike shop with Wix Logo Maker. Check it out. Go to wix.com logo maker. To start, I'll type my business.
So the current situation with student loans in America is 44 million Americans hold $1.5 trillion in student debt, and approximately 7 million of those are in default. And of course, higher education continues to soar as far as the cost, and that's actually more than triple the debt from 2004. So you can see that the rate on this debt is climbing faster than any other type of debt in America. The average cost for a 4-year education at a state university is around $40,000, and for a private university, about $150,000. It's definitely outdated every single year. Those numbers just continue to go up and up and up. And this is for just kind of average schools. If you're going to, Ivy League schools, Harvard or Princeton, you can about double those numbers. The class of 2017 is an average debt of $39,400 per student, and that's actually a skewed fact. I did an entire blog post just on this fact alone one time, because this is just taking into account federal student loans in those graduates' names. So they're not taking into account private student loans. They're not taking into account Parent Plus student loans, and those can be a ton more money. In fact, federal student loans are usually limited in the amount that you can take out, whereas private student loans, the student can borrow up to the entire cost of attendance. So I would have been able to, at 18 years old, been able to borrow $161,000. So it is kind of crazy, the fact that the debt crisis is so bad, and those numbers are not even really accurate. I'd say it's much more. How did we get here? There was good intentions by Congress. Lyndon B. Johnson signed in 1965 the Higher Education Act, and that was to enable all students from every class and race and gender to be able to go to college. Before that, college and higher education was really just for the very well-off or rich, and it was to make education available to everybody. Of course, once the government got involved, it kind of was the start to this problem. The schools were guaranteed loans by the government, and they were able to raise prices then, of course. And with the government handing out the loans, they were giving them to everybody. So it became a profit machine for the government, for private banks, for debt collectors. The schools really have no incentive to not raise their prices, because everybody is going to school. We've been kind of fed that is the recipe for success. So you have these schools where everybody is able to sign up and go no matter what the price is, and the government backing those loans. So it's just kind of came to this bubble now of where we are now. So to break student loans down, there's two types. There's federal and private, like I mentioned before. Federal student loans are the ones that are guaranteed by the government. So they have some benefits to them. They offer a lot of different options, like forgiveness if you are in the military, or teachers and nurses, public service jobs. You can actually get forgiveness on those student loans after 10 years of making payments. They generally have fixed interest rates. You can make payments based off of your income. There's no cosigner necessary, so almost anybody can get these student loans. The big drawbacks on federal student loans is that if you default on them, if you're not able to pay for some reason, they can really do a lot to your life. They can garnish your wages. They can take your income tax, sue you for the entire amount. So I get actually a little bit more into that, just about what they can do, because it is pretty scary. Private student loans, they have lower interest rates. You can find student loans as low as 2 and 3%, whereas a lot of the government loans, when I was paying them back, were between 6 and 10%. You can borrow up to the full cost of attendance, so there's no limits on the private student loans. It's generally up to your cosigner. You often need a cosigner for those private student loans. It's harder for students to get with no credit, and the banks cannot take the same actions as the government. So that is kind of one of the benefits. If you're not able to pay those back, you don't have to worry about garnished wages. They're just going to destroy your credit pretty much. The cons of this is that they're inflexible on their repayment terms. They don't really offer forbearances or deferments, income-based payments. So they can be very inflexible and more difficult to work with when you're in some trouble paying them back. So I wanted to do just a special slide on the consequences of default on federal loans, just because it is so dire if you get into that situation. There's interest capitalization, which makes your loan soar up. That's kind of what happened to me. Not that I wasn't defaulted, but I actually had $76,000 that I borrowed, and by the time I was graduated and started to pay those back, just because of interest capitalization while I was in school, they had gone up to $90,000. Added fees up to 40% of the total loan. which really doesn't help you to be able to pay it back, but they could add on a lot of fees for not paying, garnished wages. So before you even get your check, the government will take their money that they're owed out. Tax returns, they'll get seized for you and possibly your spouse. Lawsuits with the amount due in full. If you're a professional, in certain professions, they can actually take your license. So you would no longer have the job that you studied for. And then you're also unable to get more financial aid. So if you are, let's say, a parent, in your 30s or 40s, you went to school, you're defaulted, and now your child is looking to go to college. If you needed to get a Parent Plus loan for them, you would be unable to. So it definitely has huge, huge effects. And so many folks decide once they're not able to pay to just kind of ignore the problem. And I always, always urge folks, do not do that. It's the worst thing that you can do. There's a lot of benefits with the federal student loans, like I mentioned, as far as being able to pay based off of your income. And if you have, a sickness or something, you can put it on deferment. They even offer forbearance. So even if it's just, Christmas time and you're having trouble making payments because presents or something like that, you can just put it on forbearance. So it's so important to communicate with your servicer and to not just ignore the problem. There's so many folks doing that, and then this is kind of their consequence. So other consequences of the student debt crisis in general, what it's doing to our country, what it's doing to a generation. A lot of folks are not saving for retirement, and because we haven't reached retirement age, we haven't really seen the effect of what this will look like in the future for us. But that's definitely something scary to think about. I know personally I wasn't able to start saving for retirement until this year. And just knowing what I know with finances, that 6 years that I've missed out on of saving for retirement is a big deal. If I could have just started at, let's say, 25 instead of 31, it would have made a really big difference. So there's definitely going to be repercussions there. A generation unable to buy homes, get married, responsibly start a family. So we have a lot of millennials and folks around our generation that are delaying these major life kind of milestones. And it's affecting the economy as well in that way. They're not buying as much. They're delaying major purchases like cars and homes again. Less likely to go on to continued education and get professional licenses or certificates, graduate level education, and fear of higher education in the younger generation. I mean, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 5 years, this has been a really hot topic issue, and it's definitely something that's been in the media. And I know a lot of folks are not really considering college because they're afraid of student loans and carrying that debt. So why should anybody care? I know a lot of folks think, hey, if they don't have debt, it's not their problem, or millennials are just whining, they should just have to pay up. But higher education is really beneficial to everybody. To have an educated youth is very important. Individuals who are educated, they generally earn more money over their lifetime. That translates into a higher tax base for the entire country. There's less reliance on social welfare programs because higher educated folks are generally not unemployed. They're more likely to be employed, and they're not living in poverty. So you don't have those folks taking from food stamps or Section 8 or cash assistance. Higher education is also associated with greater civic engagement, lower crime, and it's just a necessity for our future as a country. So it should be treated as such and not a commodity. The solutions, in my opinion, is to have lower cost of higher education. That's definitely something that really needs to be looked at. I know some schools are kind of being progressive. My alma mater, LaSalle University, actually in 2016 lowered their tuition rates back to 2008. So it's still very expensive, but it was kind of nice to see that some schools are really getting the hint and trying to roll back on some of those prices. I've seen suggestions out there as far as basing your cost of your degree on what you're actually studying. So somebody that is studying to be a teacher is going to pay less than somebody studying to be an engineer, simply because they're not going to earn as much as the engineer is going to earn. So I really like that idea, especially because the classes may be different. You know, somebody studying, you know, computer science or engineering, they may have more technology being used in their classes, whereas somebody studying to be a teacher may not really be using those same type of resources. So I like the idea of basing the cost on the degree. And then for early financial education, this needs to be something that is drilled into our heads from a really early age. You know, starting in kindergarten, let's use play money and let's learn budgeting from a very early age. I remember in high school, and I went to a blue ribbon high school, we had one class on finance, personal finance class. We learned a little bit about budgeting, taxes, how to write a check, things like that. You know, it obviously didn't help me too much because I still made terrible financial decisions, and as have so many millions of people. So I think it's something that really needs to be put in our schools from a very early age and have a high priority, because you are battling an entire culture of consumerism and capitalism, and it's kind of like spend, spend, spend. We're not teaching budget and live on a plan and save, save, save. So we really need to change that. Better and more open guidance for students and parents of students while in high school, instead of just kind of talking about this one path to success. You have to go to a four-year school. You have to do it right out of high school to be successful. I think there should be some more open talking about community college or going to a trade school, or, you know, maybe delaying higher education. If you're not sure what you want to do, if you're not mature enough to handle that kind of responsibility, then it's not worth a $90,000 investment. Even in my case, I went to school for criminal justice, and, you know, as I have grown and come to know myself more, I realized that it's not really something I'm interested in, and I'm, you know, afraid of guns. I don't like to have conflicts, so to be a U.S. Marshal or to be a police officer is not something I'm really interested in now, and I just wish I had known myself better then, or maybe delayed going to school so I wouldn't have invested all of that into that career path. And then lower interest rates on student loans. So like I mentioned before, federal student loans are around 6 to 8%. They do change. So if you get a loan, they're fixed for you, but they kind of go up and down. That rate is set by the government, but it's just too high. 8% on a student loan. That's the reason that, you know, for 6 years, I paid back my student loans, and the balance went from $94,000 to $90,000. So only $4,000 difference in 6 years, despite making $900 a month payments. So it should have gone down a lot more. But because of interest, obviously, you don't see any progress. And for a lot of young folks, it's kind of disheartening. I don't think they really understood that when they were signing these loans. And it just doesn't really allow you to make progress. I think to have 0 to 2, 3% maybe would be a lot easier for the students. They're still repaying their debt, still paying their obligation, but able to kind of close that chapter and be able to move on in life. So I think personally, those are definitely some things that would help this crisis.
Thank you very much, Jessie. Are you finished your presentation at this time?
Yes.
I have a number of questions and comments to make.
Okay.
Okay. In Canada, we also have a crisis in terms of student loans. And it's been going on for, I would say, over the last 10 years. Now, there's a number of reasons for that, as far as I can see, and that's, first of all, people do not differentiate between getting an education and getting skills. People should be focused on getting skills rather than education. And when you get skills, What happens is that those skills then are marketable out in the marketplace. Are you having an interference on your side?
Nope.
I don't know why, but I'm getting something coming through here. So, okay. But in our society, there are 3 areas now which are still good for students to go into. First area is in health services. Second area is in trades. And the third area is in regards to technology and industry, which are usually 2-year courses. Presently, we are graduating in Canada over twice as many students as there are positions in our economy. As a result, we're having many students who are going through university, getting an education, and who are unable to find any jobs in their area. It means that for them, what they're finding is they're going back to jobs that they could do without having their university education. Are you finding the same thing in the United States?
Absolutely. I think a lot of folks in my generation, especially before we were really knowing of this crisis, it wasn't as out there as it is today. We didn't have YouTube and Facebook, back in 2006 like there is now. So a lot of us, I think, had degrees that maybe weren't really worth the money that we were investing into them. Like I said, for me, criminal justice, knowing what I know now, I would never invest that much money into that career because you're not likely to be making or earning that much right away from that type of career. So if I could do it again, I would definitely have gone down the route of studying something in the STEM category. And I think a lot of younger folks now are starting to understand that and looking at getting degrees that will be worth the money that they're investing.
In 1965, when I first went to university, at that point in time, if you got a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, you could find a job. But by 1967, 68, if you got a degree in arts or science, you were unable to find a job because the demand for people who had those types of degrees were gone. And a lot of people then shifted over and took their 5th professional year so they could become teachers. And what I've seen since that period of time, if you had a BA or BSc or whatever, there's just no demand for that degree.
Right.
And unfortunately, for some reason, the students are not told that prior to looking at going to university. And I think one of the fallacies is that they're told that if you want to get higher earnings and go up in mobility, you have to get an education. I can tell you that in Canada, a carpenter who is at the top of his game can make as much as a specialist doctor. There is a huge demand in Canada, and as I understand it in the United States, for people in trades, rather than going to college or university. if you did that, then what you're able to do is you graduate in with your trade without any student loans whatsoever, because you're working each of the 4 years to acquire skills. Oh, excuse me. In addition to that, where you find where you're, and there's a huge demand in Canada, as in the United States, in regards to the skilled trades. And what you find as well is that so many people are told that I would say a fallacy that higher education is going to automatically lead to higher income, which is not true. That's the first problem. The second problem that I see is the fact that a lot of people do not have any idea about managing money and how long it takes to pay loans off. I noticed that you went through and were influenced by Dave Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience like with him?
So after Consumer Reports did a video about me, I had a lot of followers and folks mentioning his name. I had never heard of him. And somebody actually sent me his book. And then after reading it, it was just so clearly laid out and such common sense and very basic information that I was inspired to be able to follow it. And I thought, I can do this. So I put his principles to work, and I was kind of disappointed, like, why is this not in school from a very early age? I should have, known of this man's name from high school, or at least his principles. So simple. So it was a great, great experience for me. I definitely recommend anybody with debt to at least read his book and give that plan a try.
I haven't read his book, but I've watched a couple of his videos, and I would agree with you fully. I have known people who are in the 60s who have not learned the lessons of how to manage money.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why so many folks were not learning it in school, because the teachers that are teaching probably don't manage their money. So how can they teach it? In our society, we're really learning that we're consumers and to buy. And it's not really valued to budget and to save and to have sound finances.
Right, and I agree with you. And it's really on to the individual. The individual if I was a young person today, before going to university, I would be searching out what the university is going to cost, how am I going to pay for it, as part of that decision-making process prior to going. And in addition to that, I would be going and spending some time with somebody in the field that I would be interested in to see what their life is like and to see whether or not I would fit into that more into that job or that profession.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do that, you end up like yourself, going and getting a criminology degree and not really knowing exactly what that is all about.
Exactly.
And particularly, what I went through an experience, which meant that I took a year off between third and fourth year university. And I took the year off because what I thought the reality was like and what it actually was were two different things. And what I ended up doing, and I found out that what was reality, even though that I was excellent in math, I wasn't a top person next and the outstanding person. And the reality is that unless you were outstanding, there was no positions in Canada for mathematicians.
Mm.
I think if I would have gone on and got my PhD in mathematics, I would have ended up teaching in a small college someplace, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. And that's why I took a year out to explore different alternatives, because I wasn't in the position where I could afford to get a university degree and not end up with a job or a career path afterwards. I was
Right.
not, and so you have to be very careful on what you're doing and to explore out what you want to do before you do it. In Canada, we don't have things like loan forgiveness. And I know that you mentioned it a bit earlier, but what does that entail in the United States?
So we have, for federal student loans, a number of forgiveness options, and that means they basically cancel the debt in your name. So, of course, if the borrower dies, that's one. If it's a parent plus loan and the parent or the student for whom the loan was for passes, then it is also forgiven. If you are found totally and permanently disabled by a doctor, then your federal student loans can be forgiven. That is the program that I utilized because half of my student loans were in my mother's name as Parent Plus loans. So they are taken out with the parent for the student. So they're fully in the parent's name. So because my mother became disabled, they were then forgiven. If you receive Social Security benefits, you can be eligible for student loan forgiveness. So you don't even have to be, totally disabled, but receiving disability, as long as they're not going to review your case for at least 5 years. That means that you're pretty much disabled for a long time, so they'll forgive them. If you work for a public service position, which is any government level job, it doesn't matter if you're a janitor or an FBI agent. If you work for the government for 10 years, you can get your student loans forgiven. They have certain cancellation programs state by state as well. So they have kind of individual things that you can do by state. So there's definitely a lot of different routes, and that's why I urged in my presentation, always be proactive with your student loans. Once you have them, they're not going anywhere. So you really have to acknowledge them and research them and understand them, and then be able to take the best route for yourself, whether you're repaying it based off your income or using forgiveness plans. There's some jobs out there that are now helping with repayment. So there's a lot of options out there.
One of the things that I noticed in watching one of your videos is you compiled all your loans into one. You consolidated. Could you explain the advantage of doing that for us?
Sure, and that's another thing that I'm passionate about, because I don't know if it's the same for Canada, but in the United States, there's so many companies out here taking advantage of student debt holders, and they're basically scamming them to consolidate their student loans, and it's something that you can easily do yourself as the borrower for free. So that's what I did. I took all of the student loans I had and consolidated them myself into one. So the benefits kind of vary. You don't have to do it. For me, the reason I did it was because I had probably 7 or 8 different student loans, 5,000 here, 6,000 there. So I had several payments going out each month. So really the consolidation was just to kind of make it easier to grasp the student loans of what do I have and how much do I owe. It helps you to not miss payments and just to kind of organize them. They generally don't give you a better rate if you're consolidating with the government. Sometimes it might even go up. If you have some that were at 6% and then some at 8%, I think that they took the average and then it actually made some of my rates go up. But for me, the benefit of having just one student loan versus 7, to manage was what, I don't know, the big benefit was for me.
How actually did you pay off your loan?
What was the question?
How actually did you pay off your loans?
How did I?
Yes.
So once I read Dave Ramsey's principles is really when I finally got my budget together and what became determined. So it was really just about having a plan for your money. And then about a quarter of the way into that process and with that mindset, I was able to get a promotion at my job. So I had a huge increase in pay from 2016 to 2017, and I was able to put all of that money that I was earning towards the debt without even thinking of anything else, because I already had that mindset of paying off debt and following a budget. So I was living on, $30,000, $40,000, less than that really, but I was earning much more than that, and I was just putting it all towards debt.
If you had the choice, would you have gone to university?
If I could do it again, that's a question I get often. And I'm not against college or higher education. I'm just against student loans. So the way that you pay for it. So I loved my college experience. Although I didn't end up using my degree, I think I definitely learned a lot from there. It helped me mature and blossom into the person that I am now, and being able to just network and be able to speak in front of a group and things like that has helped me greatly, even in my sales career that I have now. So there's a lot of skills that you get from going to school outside of just your degree. And I'm very grateful for that. And I definitely learned so much. So I don't regret it. I would do it again, but I would not probably choose LaSalle because it was so expensive. I would be much more financially wise. If I could go back, I would definitely go to community college first, somewhere near home that I would have been able to commute to and actually pay my way through. So you would have no debt and already get 2 years worth of credits. And then from there, transfer to a state school, ideally, again, somewhere you could drive to from home, or if you really want to have that college experience of living on campus, because even that, there's a lot to learn from, being away from home and being independent and responsible for yourself. So I'm not against that either. But if you want to do that route, you can become an RA and live on campus for free, because that's a big portion usually of that college bill is the food and the housing part of the bill. So I would recommend being an RA at a state school and then taking no more than the initial salary that you expect to earn out of school. So if you're going to be, in my case, a criminal, something in criminal justice, a U.S. Marshal is really what I wanted to be. Generally out of college, if I had got that position, I probably would have been able to earn maybe $40,000 as a starting salary. So I should not have taken out more than that in student loans. So that is, if I could do it all over again, how I would recommend.
Before I ask Jessie to give us the final word, I would ask everyone to make their comments at the bottom of the meeting. And in addition to that, if you fill out the attendance form and you're not a member of the club, by providing your correct email address, you'll be able to get a receipt from the club to give to your Rotary secretary. Now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Jessie to give the last word and the last word of advice to all of us.
So my last word, I want to really urge anybody that is watching that has somebody in their life, a young high school student thinking of going and getting a higher education, to definitely urge them to do their research, to read books about finances, and don't allow them to just make their own decisions, because that's really what I did in my family. I was one of the first to go to school, and everybody was just happy for me that I was getting the education, and there wasn't really a lot of guidance as far as what kind of choices I was making. And of course, at 18 or 17 years old, you generally don't make the best decisions always. So it's so important to help guide those young folks in your lives to making the best decisions, because it has lifelong consequences if they take out huge amounts of student debt. For the folks that already have student loans, my last word to them would be to be proactive with your debt. You cannot ignore it. It's not going anywhere, and there are options out there. And to also be proactive as far as self-education. You need to learn how to budget. You need to learn how to manage debt. And if you do that and you're consistent and dedicated, you can get rid of those student loans. And really the best way, I get so many emails every day, how I have this student loan and I have this situation. What can I do? How can I get rid of it? And it's honestly like losing weight. There's no secret pill or secret thing that you can do. It's just about eating less and moving more. And with debt, it's just about paying the debt. That's the only way out of it, is paying it. Unless you're obviously utilizing forgiveness programs or something like that. So knowing what your debt is and what your options are and paying it is really the best way to handle it.
Thank you very much.
I also would like to welcome anybody to come to my channel. It's called The Rich Cool Aunt on YouTube. I talk a lot more about individual subjects on student loans, on forgiveness, on the consolidation process, on my debt-free journey and how I've paid off the student loans. So if you're interested in hearing more, definitely check me out and subscribe to my channel at The Rich Cool Aunt.